Throughout the 19th century, the use of illustration in published magazines and books increased with the advances of printing technologies. In the 1880s and 90s begins an era of illustration we refer to as the Golden Age of Illustration, characterized by rich colors, animated figures, and a magical realism. The ultimate catalyst of the period was the work of Philadelphia author and illustrator Howard Pyle. In the late 19th century, Pyle was the name. He was a staunch believer of the illustrator as painter of beautiful images, which characterized the illustrator as the creator of fine art. Pyle would write and illustrate a number of books and magazines, and go on to teach several of the key illustrators from the Golden Age. Amongst his students were Jessie Wilcox Smith, Frank E. Schoonover, and N.C. Wyeth. As the 20th century broke, illustration was the mass media. Maxfield Parrish was one of the biggest artists. As one person said, the artistic visions that were soon floating out of Parrish's subconscious to decorate and stimulate a world hungry for such vivid, artistic dreams were filled with romance and mysterious play of distinctive light through layers of shimmering color. His work from the Arabian Nights and featuring characters from mythology are some of the most notable works of the 20th century. Illustration was one of the few fields in which women were encouraged to participate. And as illustrators went, Jessie Wilcox Smith was one of the shining stars of the Golden Age. Her illustrations of women and children showed a tenderness not yet seen in the illustration world. In Frank E. Schoonover, one might see the biggest sign of Howard Pyle's teaching influence. His work for history publications and magazines created a hyper-realistic and dynamic world. His use of unorthodox perspective and high contrast set the tone for superhuman characters. But he was no stranger to fantasy either. His work for children's stories such as Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates, and for works of Edgar Rice Burroughs, including Tarzan of the Apes, and this more pulpy illustration of A Princess of Mars, showed that he was no slouch in the realm of fantasy either. But perhaps the most notable of all the Golden Age illustrators, and certainly the preeminent illustrator after Howard Pyle, was N.C. Wyeth. His work in Treasure Island, shown here, was some of the best illustration of the day. You can see a little bit of Maxfield Parrish's luminosity and a little bit of Howard Pyle's dynamic composition in Wyeth's work. It is no surprise then that he would take over the throne as the illustrator of the Golden Age from Howard Pyle. The Golden Age of illustration awoke in the American readers a childlike quality that they had been missing.